last year was 3 weddings. But it was in Cancun. I don't remember for a week ahead of time. I didn't put shoes on for
Good evening, everyone. Hi. How are you? Hello, I am Carrie Coogan, Deputy Director of Community Engagement and Public Affairs for the library. Thank you so much for being here tonight as we celebrate a special Making a Great City series event celebrating the 20th anniversary of our beloved Central Library and the remarkable transformation of downtown. I also want to welcome those of you who are joining us from home on our library YouTube channel. Thank you for being here as well. To stay up to date, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about our calendar. You can get a print calendar, or you can also get a weekly email from us to stay up to date about all of the events going on. And there's one I wanted to tell you about that's on the cover, and that is we are bringing as a fundraiser for the library and the UMKC Creative Writing Department, our hometown mystery thriller author, Gillian Flynn, is coming to town, and she will be a part of the Writers for Readers program, which helps fund free writing and poetry classes in our community. And we will also be announcing the winner of the Maya Angelou Book Award at that event as well. So there's still tickets available if you want to join us, so I hope that you will. Pete Brown's gonna be there. Okay, we have a great lineup tonight. In just a moment, you will hear from Dennis Strait of Multi-Studio. Dennis has been a driving force in this collaboration and inspired conversation, creativity, and action for more equitable urban spaces in Kansas City. His contributions have been critical for this entire community and also for the work we do here at the library, so thanks to Dennis. You'll hear from him in just a second. Bill Dietrich is CEO of the Downtown Council of Kansas City and will give a brief presentation. Brief. And then we're going to be really honored, and it's such gratitude to have our incredible panel of guests here. Jonathan Kemper, the wonderful, amazing Mayor Kay Barnes. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, Jason Parsons from Imagine Downtown. So we have a great panel coming up as well. And then we're also going to be taking questions from the audience and from the live stream as well. But first, before all of that, it is my true pleasure to introduce the new director of the Kansas City Public Library, Abby Yellman. She's gonna kill me. I'm gonna read a little bit of your resume. Abby began her career in libraries at Mid-Continent Public Library and North Kansas City Public Library. She also led the library in Scottsbluff, Nebraska as their library director as well. She later served as the director of library services and cultural affairs for the Broomfield Public Library in Colorado. And it was there that she also became the deputy city county manager in Broomfield, Colorado, where we were able to steal her away. So, as we think about the past and the future, Abby's leadership and dedication to fostering community and expanding access to knowledge embodies the very spirit of the library's mission, and we look forward to writing new, exciting chapters together. Please welcome Abby Yellman.
Oh, and I have that moment where I'm short and I got to move the mic down. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to go off script, which I'm sure makes Carrie a little nervous, but I just want to thank you all. You know, thinking about when this building was done and thinking to my past, I was just an aspiring person at that time, an aspiring professional, and kind of what this meant to the community and to the profession at the time as well. So I'm very grateful to be with you all tonight. So thank you for joining us. It's hard to believe that just over 20 years ago, the idea of a thriving downtown Kansas City seemed like a distant dream. Many of you may remember the landscape in the late 90s. What was once called an urban wasteland was mostly vacant buildings and lots that had seen better days. The question then was, could downtown Kansas City come alive again? In 2000, our community was blessed to have leaders that had vision and determination to bring that question to life. Together, they invested $50.2 million to renovate the old First National Bank building, transform it into the Central Library we know and love today. They believed in the power of the library to breathe new life into this neighborhood, and how right they were. Since opening its doors in 2004, Central Library has been a beacon for the library district and a model nationwide for revitalizing urban areas through creativity, culture, and connection. Tonight, as we celebrate both the 20th anniversary of this incredible place and the library's 150th anniversary as part of the Kansas City community, we look back with gratitude for all that's been achieved and look ahead with excitement for what's still to come. I want to thank the staff at the Central Library and recognize the director of the Central Library, Teresa Bolton. Teresa, where are you? Stand up, my friend. There she is, Teresa. Thank you for being with us tonight. And I also want to recognize Deputy Director of Library Services, Joel Jones. Where's Joel? In the back. There he is. Thank you, Joel. Joel's pulling double duty tonight, so Joel, thank you for being with us. They work every day to continue to make this place a vibrant, welcoming place where our community can come for support, resources, but also art and culture programs and speaker events. Thank you both for all you do and all the staff does. And I would be remiss not to give a special thank you to Dorothy Elliott. Where is Miss Dorothy? There she is, Miss Dorothy Elliott, who was the director of the Central Library when it was first opened. Thank you, Miss Dorothy, for all that you have done for the library. Challenges will always be part of our story, but as we've seen over the years, when we work together, we can overcome them and create something lasting and remarkable. Now it's my privilege, and I'm excited to introduce Dennis Strait of Multi-Studio, who has been with us since the beginning of the Making a Great City series, and as Carrie mentioned, an invaluable partner in helping to explore and encourage healthy and inclusive development in Kansas City. Please give a warm welcome to Dennis Strait.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you all for showing interest in making Kansas City a great city. I need to thank our sponsors. I want to start with the library because they've been a great partner over the last 6 years. But also need to thank the Hall Family Foundation and the Kaufman Foundation for their ongoing support. Particularly for the Kaufman Foundation for the work that they supported that you'll see as part of our intro here tonight, for helping us understand our city through the work they commissioned with a group called Urban 3. So let me jump into this here. This is our 19th installment in the Making a Great City series, and all these programs are available online, so you can go back and see what we've learned. I'm going to start with the primary message about why we're focused on this topic. Because people have lots of different ways of understanding cities, but here's a way that I think it's healthy for us to understand our city. And if we're trying to make a great city, we're trying to design a city that brings people together and multiplies opportunities for residents to make life a good life for themselves and for their families. That's why we build cities. And if you look at the history of Kansas City, we peaked out in that regard back in 1940. Now, not many of us are going to be able to remember back to 1940, but I'll explain why. Because the primary benefit of cities is bringing people together. So they have opportunities for pursuing jobs, for pursuing the things they are interested in life, for pursuing their lives. And by 1940, we had brought almost 500,000 people together in what was then a 60 square mile city. And we had a very robust measure. That 7,400 people per square mile is an important measure of the vitality and health of our city, because we had that many people helping us to make a great city. And if you look back to that time, you can easily think about things like the Parks and Boulevard system. You can think about buildings like this one, when it was first a bank and now is the library. You can think about the libraries we built. You can think about the monuments we built, all the things we were able to do because we had built that level of vitality back in 1940. So that's the good news. I'm going to take you through a little decade by decade move just to show you what happened. And this is all to set the stage to connect those dots between why making a great city and why this building are important. So in 1950, we started to expand our boundaries. And then by the 1960s, we had widely expanded our boundaries as a city. And the yellow dots on this map indicate our population and where our population was. Now, just know for the last 80 years, our population has roughly been about 500,000 people, so it hasn't changed much. But watch what happens as we move through the decades to our population. And really what it's doing, it's dispersing. We built a city and we build cities to bring people together for those opportunities that we talk about. For the last 80 years, we've been too focused on driving people apart, literally driving people apart. And this is what it does. Not only did we disseminate the vitality that we'd built by 1940, but we'd also lost by that point 80,000 residents. People had just left. So our city was struggling by that point. Now, this is 1990, and I'm going to take you on through the next few decades, but one of the issues that we've talked about in this series is that by the 1990s, we started to recognize that we had expanded our city by 4 times, but we hadn't expanded our population at all, in proportion at all. So, the simple math is we now have 4 times as much city to take care of. Each one of us has 4 times as much city. And that's why we struggle to take care of our streets and to make them safe. It's really just that simple in terms of why it's hard to do all the things that we all want to do as Kansas Cityans. So that was, the challenges we created for ourselves over the last 80 years, but there's a good news side of the story that we're going to hear tonight, because 25 years ago, a certain mayor had a vision for a different path forward. She called it the River Crown Plaza idea, and it was planting a new seed to reinvest and to revitalize your city from the inside out, which was so needed at that time. So thank you for that. You'll get a chance to hear more about that in a few moments, but that effort is still ongoing, and the strongest measure that we can all think of today is the fact that we just are completing a streetcar that's extending all the way south to the plaza portion of that River Crown Plaza, and it's going to take all the reinvestment that's been created here in the downtown and help to spread it further south. So you can see the evidence of what's happened just over the last 25 years and the subsequent decades here in 2000 and 2010 and 2020 up to the present day. We are starting to increase that vitality, but it is still only about 20% of what it was back in 1940 when we were building all those wonderful things for our city and caring for our city in a different way. An important note to hear is if you look at 1940 Kansas City, where we had 444,000 people living there in those 60 square miles. And 2024 Kansas City, we now have 250,000 less people living in the center of our city. That's a measure of us losing our vitality and needing to get it back. Now, this is a map from the city's documents that shows what's happened just over those last 25 years. You'll see that a majority of our growth has been happening outward still. We're still definitely in that trend. But we've been bucking that trend for the last 25 years because of that alternative vision that was planted 25 years ago. So those green bubbles there on the left-hand side of the original boundary of 1940 Kansas City are a sign of the good that we're doing. But right next to it, those red bubbles are a sign of the problems we created with the way that we redlined our city and created public policy that was all wrong-headed for too much of our 1900s. And the challenge we have is that if you take a broader look at this, like the Mid-America Regional Council does on a regular basis, and you look out through to the next 25 years, that problem just keeps going. We keep losing residents in our center of our city, and we keep building and driving people further and further away. So this is the project that Kaufman helped to fund, that funded, I should say, that helped us see our city in a different way. And what I've described this map as being is an economic MRI for Kansas City, Missouri, because it shows where we're healthy and where we have struggles. So everything that's in dark orange and purple on this map are the parts of the city that generate more in tax revenues than they consume in city services. That's great, but 75% of our city doesn't generate enough in tax revenues to support the city services they need. And we're out of balance. We're significantly out of balance in that regard. And that's why these efforts to rebuild from the inside out are so critical to us. Over the last year, we focused a series on the national housing crisis. And it's affordable housing and everything that we've heard. And what all three of these speakers concluded, I mean, there's thousands of reasons why we created this crisis, but there's one solution that we need to focus on in order to get our way out of it, and it's simply to build as much housing as we can, to find ways to build housing. We can't build too much, because if we build too much, we'll just make it more affordable. So if that was our primary goal for the next 25 years, it could be a good one. So look at this version of a future look at Kansas City. This is saying that over the next 25 years, we can again grow by 80,000 people. Because that's what we've done over the last 25 years, which is phenomenal for the last century, for Kansas City to have grown that much, and for so much of it to have happened downtown. I just mentioned that the streetcar is starting to come south, and so the opportunities for continued investment throughout the River Crown Plaza corridor is certainly there, but all those red bubbles on that previous map are places where we could regain vitality and good if we just reinvest in our neighborhoods to the east. And that's something we just need to focus on as a significant opportunity for our city, both financially and socially and culturally, all sorts of ways. Now, while we're doing this, I do recommend that we focus on the central city, because that's the part of the city that was built for vitality. We haven't been building our city for vitality out to the edges, and we need to start finding ways to build vitality there too. So you'll see there's a suggestion about there ought to be spots of places where we can bring people together in areas all throughout our city. Not just focus on the central city, but we'll get the best return if we focus on our central city. So all that brings us back to this central library. Because in many ways, this alternative way of seeing what our future could be started with what the Downtown Council's been focused on, what your panelists today represent, is civic leadership taking a different look at where our city should go and to try and buck the trend that we've been on for the last 80 years. So I'm excited that we'll have a chance to hear about why this project was an important part of that catalyst that helped us move in this different direction. So for the last 25 years or so, Bill Dietrich and Ann Holliday and the talented crew at the Downtown Council have been guiding the redevelopment of downtown. And we all know, if we've been around for a little while, that the downtown we have today is completely different than the downtown we had 30 years ago. So thank you to them and to all the civic leaders that have helped to get us to this point. Bill's going to present to us. I'm going to give you a little background on Bill. Bill came to Kansas City back in 2002. And he brought with him 25 years of economic and city development experience from the city of Seattle. Bill, just to give you a little background on Bill, his bachelor degree was from Evergreen State College. So that says a lot. If you don't know Evergreen State College, look it up and you'll get the little clue into Bill's thinking. He also got a master, he's got 2 master's degrees, one in business administration and managerial leadership, and the second is in entrepreneurial real estate development, which has certainly been our focus for the last 25 years. We are so lucky to have Bill's leadership here in our downtown area, and I'm thrilled that he's here to share his experiences and thoughts with us tonight. So everybody please welcome Bill Dietrich.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us tonight. It's a great story to tell at the library. I have to chuckle, the Evergreen State, our mascot, that's in Olympia, Washington, our mascot was the fighting gooey duck. So I mean, think that's, that's the Northwest. I'm gonna start a little slow, but I promise I will pick up pace. It's really an honor to be with you here tonight. To review this incredible project that we are all engaged in. It's so wonderful to see faces of people in the audience who have been with us through this journey from 2002 through today, and new young people who are really the inheritors of all this work, the next generation. Jason Parson represents this new kind of energy, and Gib Kerr and others in our community who are really looking to the next 20, 30 years of downtown's growth. And as I was kind of going through the archives for this presentation, because it's been 20 years since we worked on this project, it also brought me to a point where I suddenly realized that there are many people on this journey who aren't with us anymore and who aren't here today. And I always struggle with the openings of these presentations, then I kind of get going. But I bumped into a letter, and it was a letter from a gentleman named Phil Kirk. And if you know Phil, down in the main lobby of the library is the Phil Kirk Hall. And I want to start really, he expresses it better than I can, and just read to you just really quickly some words from Phil that he wrote back in September 28th, 2001 at the beginning of this journey. He says, "I appreciate the opportunity to be on your program and to be a small contributor to the library project, which has benefited from the leadership of Jonathan Kemper, John Laney, and their marvelous organizations and foundations, and other great contributors at the Kauffman Foundation. Their efforts, coupled with the Downtown Council and the Community Foundation, have enabled us to move forward with the restoration of this historic National First Bank building as the new home for the main branch of the Central Library in Kansas City. Experience teaches us that man lives by symbols and relates to others through symbolic expression. We also know that knowledge and information can be used for good and for evil purposes. It's also valuable to have the engineering knowledge and, knowledge of how to structurally build a bridge, but the wisdom and foresight of what it is that connects the bridge is even more vital. Why do we build the library? It is only when knowledge is held to the accountability of balance, wisdom, humor, and cultural and ethical standards that it becomes connected to the soul of our heritage and maximizes the human experience. Simply stated, we enjoy life through the help, society, friendship, and connection with others. We need a place of center where we can rub shoulders with the wisdom and heritage of previous generations, and a place of interaction with others with different vantage points than ours on the human experience. Just as an unexamined life is not worth living, disconnected knowledge is not worth having. Perhaps this is why people are flocking to libraries and bookstores in record numbers. That really struck me when I was kind of digging through the archives of why we did this project. And you've done it right when you engage the community, preserve our heritage through restoration of historic buildings, and create a cultural legacy for future generations. The library and the district represent a case study, a microcosm on how to revitalize an entire downtown. Visionary political leadership, visionary civic leadership, really brings a committed cultural institution, civic community support, and a visionary catalytic plan to create a new neighborhood where none existed, and a sense of place where there was only blight. We see this vision replicated throughout the neighborhoods of downtown: Union Hill, UMKC's Health Sciences District, Samara Road's efforts, a $600 million project down the West Bottoms, mixed-use development going on the riverfront today, an $800 million restoration, revitalization of our riverfront, anchored by CP Casey Stadium, which is just amazing. A template for future Major League Baseball park and district downtown, past, present, and future. But it always wasn't this way, filled with opportunity. Let's take a look at the start. This is the beginning of the downtown revitalization. You certainly have to have imagination and a little faith when you look at this picture. This is shot from City Hall. This was Mayor Barton's view every morning in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it motivated her to make a commitment to lead the efforts to save our downtown. Her vision was to create a 21st century downtown by diversifying land uses to make a greater downtown that not only was the center for business, but a home for arts and culture, sports and entertainment, visitors and conventions, and probably most importantly, residential neighborhoods. Just a little kind of stats. At this point in time, 65,000 employees work downtown. We had about 6,000 residents, and in the year 2002, 500,000 people visited downtown. A little teaser for later on. First half of 2024, 10.8 million people visited downtown. That's the transformation that we see happening in our community. Nobody wanted to work here, nobody wanted to live here, nobody wanted to be here. It was more than symbolic that Main Street was one way south to Johnson County. The downtown street grid had been designed by traffic engineers to vacate in 5 minutes. So you came here, you worked, and you got out. No urban walkability, no density, the things that we see today in kind of modern downtowns. There was a sea of surface parking lots, blighted areas and abandoned buildings. Sketchy retail, catering to some of the worst in human nature. Sean and I would say crack houses posing as bars. It was not a pleasant place to be. Public infrastructure in terrible condition. This represents 250 non-functioning storm drains in downtown. We used to have an infrastructure repair task force. We meet monthly with the city. We kind of charted all this out with the mayor's office. And I can remember we saw one storm drain had grass growing out about 6 feet tall. Piece of plywood over it that had been there so long they painted the crosswalk on it. And Mayor Barnes and we were talking, and she said, "Well, who's responsible for this?" And a nameless person in the city department said, "Oh, that's Mayor Barnes's greening initiative." And Mayor Barnes looked back and said, "You think that's funny? You want to be working here tomorrow?" And she brought that energy of change and that commitment to changing our downtown. By the way, my personal favorite's on the right. This is, I think a fiber optic guy came through town, cut all the cable, well, he's laying fiber optic, cut all the cable that connects to the street lights, the traffic lights. So this was an acceptable standard. Public Works, who's not with us today, very different Public Works today, but anyway, chiseled through the concrete, pulled out the power line, ran it through the cone for safety, and jerry-rigged the traffic lights. This was a temporary solution. When I came to town, I'd been here for 5 years. Crumbling infrastructure. How do you sell Class A office or attract visitors or attract residents if this is the quality of your product? And through her leadership, there were a number of major infrastructure bonds that went forward to correct and repair this. Over $350 million under her tenure, which made all this blight go away and really set the stage for the good things that you see downtown today. So a little closer to home, this is our building, pretty much in tough shape here. Been closer to, been empty for quite a while, Jonathan, a decade? 5 years. But a beautiful historic property and just ready to be revitalized and brought back to life. A blank slate for a new public library. We knew our responsibility just didn't end at the front door. We had to create a neighborhood where there wasn't one. So in addition to the project, we looked around the neighborhood. And this is our neighborhood, surface parking lots. This is where the library garage today stands. Beautiful abandoned historic buildings like the Baker of Otter that we're looking at here. Board of Trade building, the 21 Hanover, 21 West Hanover Place. obsolete for office use, but prime for redevelopment into residential. And they also represent kind of our history and our heritage. I mean, I'm from Seattle where historic buildings like this don't exist. And it was such so we looked outside and we thought we need to use this project to be a catalyst to restore these buildings. Here's the Kansas City law, a huge potential, but in a reason need to move forward and needed a vision, a catalyst. And for this 6-block area, that would prove to be this amazing library that we're in today. A state-of-the-art, future-facing building and organization committed to cultural programming, education, job training, and much more. The Central Library Project proved to be the investment that sparked the rebirth of the entire neighborhood. It embraced not only the library, but you can see our footprint as we took a look at this entire area. So our job was to work with developers to let them know this project was going forward, and who could we attract to investing their funds into this neighborhood, which again at that time was about 8 blocks of just blighted property. This was one of downtown's major revitalization's beginnings, and it was really one of our first examples of what today, I mentioned earlier, the work on the West Bottoms, the riverfront, potential ballpark village. This was our really first mixed-use development that was anchored by, in addition to kind of the earlier work done on Quality Hill and DSC developments, led by Phil Kirk and also Jonathan Kemper and John Laney, and many others who were, who really looked at the adjoining neighborhood to these that said, this is the next area for revitalization. How can private, philanthropic, public officials, state departments, federal government leaders, civic organizations, and the private sector advance such a daunting undertaking? Why? It's easy, just through a simple organizational structure like this. I'll let you take a look at that for a moment. Thank you. Well, okay, maybe it's not that simple, but it was effective and it was resilient. And as we will find out, which is equally important to me in my job, it's replicatable. I can take this model and do other projects, do other neighborhoods. And if you look at what's happening in our city today, you see this footprint everywhere. From 02 to 04, the DTC, through this organizational structure of subsidiary corporations, managed the development of the library project in its 500-stall iconic garage. Once completed, DTC1 actually owned the property and leased it back to the facility for 5 years until the obligations on tax credits, et cetera, were expired, and then deeded it over to the library. Thank you to all the amazing partners, again, we're kind of in history here, who made this project possible. MC Linus, HNTB, BNIM, CDFM Squared, Tice Doolittle, J. Dunn Construction, community partnership groups on fundraising. And this really was a public-private partnership. Support from Missouri State, Missouri through Missouri Development Finance Board tax credits, which we used on the garage, historic tax credits, which we utilized on the property. The city was an amazing partner on the project as well, and 500 private donors. So it really took a huge civic vision and effort to pull all this together. Abby mentioned earlier kind of this was the working budget at the time, you can see for the project. In addition to that, a $10 million garage. So what were the results of all these collective efforts? A cultural legacy for generations, one that supports human connectivity, what in my business we call a differentiated experience, something new that didn't exist before, something unique that attracts people from all over our region. But as I mentioned earlier, our goal was not only to this amazing facility, but the creation of a dense, walkable, urban neighborhood that was a human scale, a neighborhood that saved a dozen historic properties in addition to this one. Incredible. So foundational to our heritage. That, through the dense built environment, added to the city's tax base as we've added new residents, properties back in to support the city and efforts, and really to reweave kind of a torn urban fabric that was just, again, a sea of kind of nothing in between. Today, it's a cultural center for our community. This photo is from a kickoff event we had here just a few months ago for the Art in the Loop Foundation annual art program. We provide opportunities and commissions to artists to do public art in the public realm. It's a great partnership we have with the Streetcar Authority. Check out the streetcar stations for commissioned artworks from the Art in the Loop Foundation. And these artworks add to our heritage and to building a vibrant arts ecosystem. And we celebrate here at the library, which, fabulous event. Okay, so the Central Library is a welcoming place for everyone. Oh, I don't know about those guys, but where was security when you needed them? This again was our kickoff event at the Art in the Loop event this year. This year's theme, very appropriate, was convivencia, a Spanish term that comes from and associated with the complex interplay between religious, social, and cultural practices. Out of discord comes the potential that may arise in commonality, but we have to be comfortable living with discord. Very appropriate for our times. The library district parking garage helped create a sense of place. To be a catalyst for our dense urban neighborhood development, we had to create a sense of place where there wasn't one. I remember Jonathan Kemper took us on, organized a trip to several peer cities and libraries where we looked for ideas and iconic placemaking concepts, and we came back with this, the community bookshelf. See how small the trees are? They're kind of tall now, which is cool. But the bookshelf became so successful, it became an Instagrammable moment and defined the neighborhood. People often mistook it for the library until they learned where the library was. Funny, I still get calls from the public. They want me to saw down the trees so they can see the book spine. And it's like, we like the trees too. But it's kind of funny. That's how much people really function as it was and create this real sense of place. The garage is a case study, a perfect example of what we call district parking, a small investment in mixed use. This not only serves the library, but the entire neighborhood, the retailers, the residents, all utilize this public space, and it has a huge return to our city, and it's the right way to do public garages. In addition to the library and garage, the project invested in creating a vibrant public space around the library. Working together, we developed a streetscape master plan that enhanced the environment outside the library and throughout the neighborhood. 10th Street was converted into two-way street, from a two-way to a one-way street. From a one-way to a two-way street. With a lot of traffic calming, we really want to set the stage for pedestrians to be comfortable in the neighborhood and not have cars flying through at 40 miles an hour. We also established neighborhood TIF, which captured the increase in values to invest back into the neighborhood, back in those public infrastructure investments. So really smart design. In 2003, we led a $35 million obligation bond at the city campaign. It passed successfully, and we got $15 million of that for downtown. We used $2.6 million to do the streetscape in the library district, and the city hired us to help manage the design process. Mr. Kemper, who was intimately involved in that design and how it developed, and really pushed us to be always thinking of a better quality than the one we were coming up with. But it really lasts. Pedestrian-friendly, active, and engaging environments is being developed through visual coherence, continuity, and quality of that streetscape. Together, these investments set the stage for the revitalization of the neighborhood, and it provided a template for many initiatives to follow. More than a dozen historic properties were saved and repurposed. Beautiful buildings whose economic life as office had reached its end. Over 65 buildings to date, in addition, this was really the vanguard, the case study, the prototype, have been saved throughout our downtown. They represent over 9 million square feet of repurposed, beautiful historic properties into residential properties. That's an amazing accomplishment for any community. You shall be very proud of yourselves for doing that. It's an amazing accomplishment. And this really provided us that prototype, that template we could take out to other developers in other areas. Today, over 2,500 people call the library and adjacent garment district home. The library garage services the entire community. In addition to the library, the enhanced streetscape, traffic calming, and iconic garage have created a vibrant culture-based community and a neighborhood where once only blight existed. We replicated that model here at the library, that development model to rehab the 100-year-old coal-burning power plant to the Todd Bollender Center for Dance and Creativity. Again, you really had to have some imagination. I think you could turn this into a ballet school where today 600 students daily take classes. It changed our ballet troupe from rehearsing in a garage next door to Denny's and performing at now the beautiful YMCA, but it was the old Lyric Theater, to rehearsing at the Todd Bolander Center and performing at the Kaufman. The quality of the troupe went through the roof, the performances, it's just again, a different kind of catalyst, a cultural catalyst, but it's based on this model here in the library that really made that possible. Okay, so shifting gears quickly, what has all this kind of work accomplished over time? This library project was the proof of concept that really helped spark the next generation of mixed-use development that continues to this day. Since '02, we've had $10.6 billion of investment in our downtown, and $3.5 billion planned investment. I want to show you just a couple quick slides of the future where we're actually kind of moving forward. This really represents the population growth in downtown. Today, almost 34, this slide's a little old, 34,000 people call downtown home. And that is critically important when you think about resiliency. During COVID, the pandemic, many of our wonderful sister cities, their downtowns were devastated. Those 34,000, when the employees went away to their homes to work during the worst of the pandemic, those 34,000 residents kept all of our retailers alive. I'm from Seattle, I was just there the other day, Fifth Avenue. The corporate buildings are half populated. All the retail's gone. It used to be like your Michigan Avenue, right? It's empty. That didn't happen here. We actually lost 20 retailers and added 40 during COVID. We added 3,000 residents during COVID. And that is critically important to your resiliency. That density pays dividends. If we look at the office sector, today, this comes from some slides we did for kind of post-pandemic recovery. We want to kind of know where we were in the world. And today, 76% of downtown employees are back in the office. If you take a look and you head towards your suburban competition, those numbers drop down to about 50. And we think there's an important distinction to be made here. If you look, this is a really interesting slide in brief. What it shows is if you live within 2 miles of downtown, 100% of those employees are back in the office at least 3 days a week. You go out to the 2 miles, that drops down to 88%, 5 miles to 73, 64. And we think why that is important and what that tells us is that amenities matter. People want to live around where there are interesting things to do, differentiated experiences, of a mixed use, of a mixed variety. From Power and Light District, T-Mobile Center, Kaufman Center for Performing Arts, Central Library, the current CPKC Stadium. The list goes on and on. 18th and Vine with the fabulous things happening with the Shaw Brothers and the new cultural center and a lot of great work happening throughout our community. It's the carrot. People want to live around that. So what's that tell you? If you want to repopulate your business center, build more residential. Build it in a dense urban fabric in a walkable neighborhood. Where's that place us on the national scale? We're fourth by percentage in recovery across the nation. Again, Bill Dietrich doesn't make these stats. These are all third-party empirical stats we get from Placer AI or My Sidewalks or other data sources who compile the information for us. There we take a look at that 10.5 million visitors who are here in the first half of this year, up from 500,000 in 2002. And we're third in recovery across the nation. And we really make this point because I think you attribute those quick recoveries. And we have a lot of work to do. We got a lot of service parking lots. We're only halfway to where we need to be. We definitely were hurt by COVID, as everyone was. And we're still hurt by it. But I think having that diversified downtown that had those cultural amenities like the library, that have wonderful restaurants and nightclubs and entertainment venues from the Kaufman Center to T-Mobile to Green Lady Lounge for jazz, you name it. I mean, there's so much going on, the Blue Room, there's so much going on in our city that attracts people. And so in conclusion, we have today excuse me, I want to get the number right. Over $1.6 billion worth of projects are going on today, are being built as we sit here. In the pipeline, another $2.7 billion worth of projects. including one we're really excited about, and we have a long way to go. It's called the South Loop Project. We want to build a 4-block park over I-670 to reconnect the crossroads to the CBD and correct that horrible urban design mistake that was made in the 60s, kind of tearing our neighborhoods apart. A little $250 million project, but we'll get there. But it all began here with the mall. Again, this is the same model we used here at the library. It's bringing together the political leadership, civic leadership, in this case, to create that new amenity. But downtowns don't have the ability to stay the same. You're either decaying, losing market share, losing population, or you're growing, you're investing, you're coming up with new exciting ideas. And it all started here with the germ here at the library. So I want to thank everyone on the library staff here with us today for having us with you, and I look forward to the next 20 years. Thank you. So with that, I'd like to invite up, let's start with Mayor Barnes to our panel discussion. Mayor Barnes really was the vision. The political leadership actually got me in town from Seattle, where I was quite happy. But I saw a vision, I saw leadership, and I knew, boy, it was now or never. And I'm so happy that I trusted you and made the jump, and just had a kind of amazing experience for the last 20 years. Really, the civic leader and energy behind this project is Mr. Jonathan Kemper, who really led the way and took ownership of this and wouldn't let go of it for years until it was of the best quality you could imagine. And I really... You're the next one over, Jonathan. Over here? Yeah, please. There you go. And with us also is Jason Parson. Jason has led we did a new strategic plan. The old one, we were so successful, it was kind of done. And it's called Imagine Downtown KC 2030. And to make plans work, you have to have implementation committees that work them daily. And Jason has chaired that for the last 2 years. He's our first vice chair at Downtown Council. Will be chairing the organization next year. He's also a developer and an investor in 18th and Vine. We're going to ask about a couple of the projects that he's done out there and kind of how it works in mixed use. So Mayor Barnes, let me start with you.
Yes.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about what you were thinking in 2002. Where'd the vision come from, and how did the library center get into your thinking?
I want to acknowledge everybody who's here, and as I look out at the audience, I do see people who have been with us on this journey and appreciate so much you being here, and certainly the people you see up in front have also been an important part of what has happened over the last 20 plus years. It has been a journey, it's been an adventure, and one of the highlights for me was the whole story of this building and what it has become, and the wonderful garage. And Jonathan doesn't know this, but I have a confession to make. When I first saw the initial rendering of the garage with the wonderful books, I was skeptical. And I thought, oh my gosh, will that really work? My skepticism was 100% wrong. It is one of my favorite parts of not only this immediate area, but also really throughout the River Crown Plaza area. And that concept of the River Crown Plaza really came from a discussion I had with Bill Lucas in probably 2000 or 2001. He headed up Crown Center at that time. We were having lunch, and together we came up with the idea of naming River Crown Plaza to illustrate a Champs-Élysées in Kansas City, that linear stretch that is really unusual in any large city. To have all of those amenities that were already there, and also what has obviously developed since then and what the future holds. I attended an Urban Land Institute conference, a very small conference, where 5 of us as mayors from around the country were given the opportunity to make a half-hour presentation and receive feedback from about 20 architectural and urban planning leaders from around the country. I wish you all could have been there with me, because as I was describing what we thought here in Kansas City could be a linear, as I said, Champs-Élysées, River Crown Plaza, the reaction of those experts was really exciting. Surprisingly to me, they knew a lot about Kansas City already. They knew about the fountains. They knew about the statuary. They knew so much, and they were so enthusiastic. And basically what they said was, keep at it, keep connecting, keep having that string of amenities, and visually have it be attractive, have it be beautiful. So I think we're on our way.
Well, thank you so much. And please jump in anytime anyone else has any comments. And I forgot, we will have Q&A afterwards, so we'll have some microphones up here for you, and we can ask questions once at that point of the program. Jonathan, an amazing legacy. You should be so proud. What was your inspiration? Why this why was the library, of all the things you could have invested your intellectual and civic energies in, why the library?
Well, Bill, can everyone hear me? First, there were a lot of people that were part of it, and I'm so glad to see Dorothy again back in the library. Dorothy and Clint not only came downtown and did the library, but still live across the street. So it became part of the library neighborhood, and I guess that was part of it. Is my office was a block away, and I was looking just to the west every day and saw it's not getting better. As a matter of fact, it was getting really bad. All these pre-World War II buildings were almost vacant and derelict, and the building across the way had a terribly failed nightclub. I mean, terribly failed. So it was really, really bad. I think we bought this property, all of it, for, you had it on the slide, about $4.5 million, and got this pile of marble and bronze as part of the deal. I mean, it's amazing that the First National Bank had been by that time merged into the Bank of America. They wanted no part of investing in downtown. So, they were doing, and if you were mentioning the people that really made this happen, Phil Kirk is a philosopher, a poet, and also a lawyer, and also an amazing real estate guy. He had done this sort of work in probably more than 20 other buildings downtown, and he had a staff that knew exactly what it cost and how to do it. I also, we mentioned John Laney kind of in passing, but not only was he part of the team, and at that point he was the #2 guy at the Hall Family Foundation, but he also was previously a deputy manager at the city, so he knew everything. And he was the guy that the Civic Council tasked to find you, I think. So
that's true.
So we had all these people. It was kind of, when I think back, and Olivia Dorsey, who at that point was the chair of the library board, it was kind of like the Avengers. Everyone brought some talent, and the vision behind it was that you could use, I mean, the library at that point had come out of the school district. It was looking for a new location. Dan Bradbury, the able director for what turned out to be 17 years, really wanted to have a self-service facility, which he described as kind of a previous supermarket that we could get on a single floor. And it was the board that said, no, we want the flagship library to be a central library, not just for this, but for the whole region, and really set the standards high. I'd say the thing that really happened here was a lot of great things came together. Rick Green bought the New York Life building down the street, and so the neighborhood began to turn positive. There's a lot of other investment in here, but the thing that you mentioned earlier, the fact that you could have a library district with an institutional anchor, and the library is here to stay, and the easiest part of this whole thing is thanks to Wilder and White, this building looks like a library and has for the last 95 years when we bought it. It's a great building. Actually, I'd say it's even better as a library than it was as a bank. I'm not saying that just because we were competing with the First National Bank. Anyway, so the vision was shared when you went to people like the Kauffman Foundation and Hallmark and others. They said, well, of course, we can see that. It took a while. I mean, one of the neat things was the library board was a little skeptical. Why are these people doing such nice things for us? They'd never really dealt with numbers this large, and thought, well, we'll have to issue bonds and that sort of thing. The total cost to the library was $10 million, and as part of that, they also got for free the library garage, which is actually making money now. So, I mean, compared with any other city, where the bills were 10 times that or more, it was a bargain for them. And I think they really didn't trust us, as we first came in and said, here, we've got a plan for you. But, that came around, and I think the library feels like it's a good deal now. So, yeah, I'd say a lot of people that were involved in it, and as we went down it, things fell together.
The bookshelf, how'd that come to be? Tell us that story. This is a good story.
I think that this is a combination of things. One is the original plan from the architects was to have a precast concrete building, which it is. And if you want to see what the original plans are, you can see it because the facade that you don't normally see on the north side is what they wanted to do.
Yep.
And it's very austere. And I said, well, can't we do something fun here? And they said, what do you have in mind? I said, well, I'm thinking that these things are 25 feet tall by 8 feet wide. What if we made them look like books? And they said, I don't know. And actually, one of the architects said, we like the poetry of concrete.
The poetry of concrete.
And I said, well, really? He says, yeah, it expresses the garage-itude. And I said, well, how about books? He says, and he didn't intend that to be a pun. He said, well, isn't that too literal? Yeah. So anyway, Phil Kirk, who actually was a scholar among many things on garage design. I mean, what you see there in terms of being an open and attractive garage is really Phil's suggestion in terms of layout. And all we did was say, gee, if you could take these precast things and put spines on them, then we actually have something that's a lot of fun. And one of the measures of good architecture is delight. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things like when you go to the Nelson, you see the shuttlecocks, it brings a smile to your face. And there are so many things about this. I shout out to Dimensional Innovations, which I think is a great treasure in Kansas City. They had this attitude of, why not? We'll do that. And they did. And it looks like a bookshelf. And it was fun to work with the community people and the library on selecting the titles. And we got Charlotte, my daughter's name, onto the thing with Charlotte's Web, which I feel very happy about. But all the Crosby used to say, a great library is as much about perennials as annuals, that these books are ones that we wanted people to know are kind of there for the long term and will be around. And they really deepen. When you walk by, you know it's about the library, but also each of the titles has a story behind it. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I marched around town on a lot of different developments that we've been working on the last 15 years as that it was such a success that it serves the whole community. It isn't just the library, but I was talking to Jared Campbell, who works with us, I think, here tonight. He lives across the street as well. That's where he parks his car as a resident. And so it serves the residents, the retailers, the visitors, and visitors to the library. So it's just a great example of a mixed-use garage.
Back on getting pushback from the architects, eventually Phil said, this is going to cost us $10.5 million, and we're going to get, I think, an additional 250 cars. We don't need those in order to park this is, as you said, a district amenity. So, and John is raising the funds. If you don't do what he wants, then we're not going to have a garage to build. And so what Al Capone said, you can achieve so much with a nice word and a gun than just with a nice word alone. They got the message that they needed to entertain this. It was stressful to them, and they came up with a competing proposal, and I said, well, tell me what the difference in cost is. He said, oh, yours is cheaper. And I said, well, yeah, the total cost of the library garage was the $10.5 million, but putting the book spines on cost, I think, additional $200,000 to $300,000 total. And they're replaced. If we've had one gunshot that is there, if you have a panel that gets damaged, you just unbolt it and put it back in. It's perfect for an urban setting.
Very good. It's amazing. Jason, so many parallels to your work at 18th and Vine. Right now, Jason and his team have taken on the old, because it's historic, Boone Theater building, which has an amazing history to it. We took a look at that a decade, 15 years ago. We're in Peter Elorda back in the day and couldn't pull anything together, but the history of the property is amazing. And when I think about cultural institutions, development projects, that synergy, can you tell us a little bit about that project and its kind of place in, again, a mixed-use kind of community?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, first of all, our office is located in the historic Jazz District as well. I have a communications company located there. And for us, I know when I was looking to establish where we were going to plant our flag, it was the historic Jazz District. And to me, if you look at 18th Street as a whole, I call it a cultural corridor. And what do I mean by that is either you could go east or west, it doesn't matter, but if you start on the west end, you certainly have all the galleries and the crossroads, and as you continue east, you then have the museums, Jazz Museum, Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. You have our building, which will house the Black Movie Hall of Fame, the Black Rep offices, and then you have the Joe Brothers. And you continue east along 18th Street. Obviously, you could end up at Arthur Bryan's, and which is not a bad place to be, but it's a cultural corridor. And so for us, this is the second project in the Jazz District. And in our first project, we opened the only black brewery in the state of Missouri. The building's located across the street from the old castle. That was a project that was near and dear to our heart. It was sort of a catalyst project in the Jazz District. And then when we had the opportunity to buy the Boone Theater, we were sort of perplexed initially, what could we do with it? To your point, there were many different ideas about what it could be. And so for us, it was very important to maintain some type of cultural identity within the Jazz District, but at the same time be creative and forward-thinking and what it could possibly be. And so working with a number of folks here locally, we come up with the idea of, again, a Black Movie Hall of Fame, which would be housed on the lower floor there, and then the Black Rep will also be housed there. We will be able to have events in the Boone Theater, live events. My office will be located on the second floor. On the third floor, you will have other businesses as well. So we're looking forward to having it open here in the next 15 to 18 months, but it certainly have been a building that's really been sitting there. And if you look at the Jazz District as a whole, there's a lot of momentum happening right now, and we're just glad to be a small part of it.
That the attic school was reinvested in, and have you been there? It's an amazing property that it really now anchors the kind of eastern end.
Yeah, the Joe Brothers. Alan Gray played a significant role in that. He also helped out with the airport when you think about all the arts, and so that's a building too that it sat idle for a long time. Obviously, great bones. And to be able to have now such activity in it, the arts community, studios, it certainly complements everything that's there in the district as of right now.
And Mr. Boone, the Boone Theater, Mr. Boone was a instrumental person bridging from kind of earlier music to jazz, and was really an iconic individual in our community, and I hope we celebrate him a bit in the project.
Yeah, we will, certainly.
Yeah, it's incredible. Mayor Barnes, we talk about $10.6, $11 billion of investment over the last 15, 20 years. Modern streetcar now, which will run down to UMKC. And I really believe people, all of us, that's going to change the way we experience that whole, as Dennis was pointing out, that whole kind of urban core, that economic engine for our city from UMKC to the river. Right, it's going to end up right by the new Origin Hotel, which is a half a block walk to the current stadium, CPKC. But you see all these amazing investments. When I think about your work at 18th and Vine, it's like, what's that first east-west streetcar connection? To me, it's to connect the Heritage District, 18th and Vine down Southwest Boulevard. I think it would be just a fabulous kind of addition to our community. But when you look at all the investment that's happened, all the different types of projects that have gone forward, cultural and arts and business and commercial and residential, what do you see, what do you think is the next kind of big wave for down? I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but we're just kind of back in the game. Our national competition isn't waiting for us to catch up. I mean, they're still investing and growing in their cities. What's kind of your vision for the next 10 years, do you think?
Certainly, in the next 10 years, it will be important to continue what's already being developed. And I want to go back to what you were saying about 18th Street. I would add 12th Street. I would add Independence Boulevard. It's so important from my perspective that in the medium and long run, there is a recognition of how important those corridors are. And it's not about only the River Crown Plaza strip. It's also important, all of those other east-west connections. And so all of that needs to be understood and supported. I think one of the real risks when there is success in economic development is a lot of people think, well, we did that, so now we can move on to something else. From my perspective and what I learned is that would be a big mistake. We need to continue to be progressive. We need to be willing to take risks in economic development, in understanding that job creation is a result and expanding housing is incredibly important for the next 10 years. So I just don't want to see there be an attempt to somehow pull back or circumscribe or say, we've done enough. It's never enough.
Oh, you make a really good point about the residential development. I think one of the things we take, in addition to the kind of resiliency I talked about earlier, when the economic hard times come, this resident base really kept us, going forward through that. But we take, I think, great satisfaction in recognizing that greater downtown, that footprint, is the most diverse community in our region. It is 50-50 men and women. It's about the same in married and singles. It is ethnically the most diverse community, neighborhood in our community. 51% of the folks who live in downtown are not majority culture. They're a wonderful mix of all sorts of different kinds of people who live downtown. And that gives us strength and I think power. So I really appreciate that, because I too think residential, that continued kind of investment. And I tried to draw earlier that kind of connection between people live within 2 miles of downtown, 100% are back in their offices. If you want to grow the commercial office real estate market, keep building residential, because people want to live in a walkable, dense, diverse kind of community, and safe and clean. And we can't take our eyes off those principles, those fundamental things that once you build it, you have to take care of it. And that's what I love about this project, Jonathan, is we took care of the entire neighborhood. It wasn't just the front door, your responsibility in it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that came to be, that broader vision?
The broader vision of bringing in the district was, the city did have programs for neighborhoods. We did have this, we had a series of developers who recognized with the historic tax credits, essentially providing the equity to do the renovation, that the buildings were worth more as residences. And there are a lot of people who felt that a neighborhood that was an urban experience was something that they could identify with. And it was a great, so basically it all happened at once. All the buildings within 3 years were purchased and begun to be converted into residences. It's interesting, it took the city a while to figure out that the library district was a thing. And I think it wasn't until we had a new city manager and he moved into the library district that we really got the sense of these guys actually know what they want to do. The deferral was, it's not in our plan. And once he got here, he said, well, actually, they met Lori Bowman and we showed them the plans. He says, so I don't have anything to approve on that. And the streetscape came in and everything. So it was just a happy accident that we got, and as you mentioned, the downtown council really cleaned the place up, and the ambassadors, the bumblebees, really made it a place. And the fact that that group is also tied into keeping the library meant that you have this amazing sense of community where people don't feel like the community starts and stops at the door. It continues on. So I'd say we can both take some credit in terms of vision on that one.
It's really amazing, folks, when you look out the door. I also consider the library district to be one of the healthiest residential neighborhoods in our community. You have a market rate condominium next to a LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit project, so it's rent restricted, next to a market rate apartment building, next to the Graphic Arts, which is a LIHTC, a rent restricted property, next door to Baker Vaughter, rent restricted, next door to the Union Carbide, which is a market rate condominium. And mixed income works. It's so healthy. We have little issues, but they're little issues, just living issues, you know, people with people living in areas. But it's just been a real poster of how to do it right, how to make a neighborhood that isn't just affluent or just kind of at risk or in poverty. It's a wonderful mixed-use neighborhood that really works well. And I always like to throw out kind of fun stats. Like, a lot of people don't know, if downtown were a city, it'd be the 11th largest in the Metroplex by population. It's the fastest growing neighborhood in the Metroplex. And you see that bar chart or that graph going up. And it's about those amenities like the library. It's about making a rich environment that people want to be in. It makes a huge difference to everything that we do. And I think we've been, the Royal We have been really very successful in kind of creating a sense of community where there wasn't one. And it didn't happen overnight, it happened over 20 years. I was meeting with some colleagues in St. Louis, and their downtown is in difficult straits at the moment. Beautiful inventory of buildings, they're all empty. You can walk down 11, I was there, actually I got called to be on a panel, and I didn't know at the time, but the title of the panel was, put on by the civic community, was, how did Kansas City do it? Now, I mean, think about that 20 years ago, right? And it was like the early days here. It was about 200 downtown stakeholders, true believers, and they were really looking for what's that roadmap back. We stayed at the 21C Hotel, which we have a beautiful one over here, and it was a 6-block walk to the first coffee shop, to the first anything. It's just empty of people. Not a lot of folks live there. I think it was the AT&T building, which is a high-rise, 36-story, million-square-foot high-rise, is empty, halfway boarded up. I think it just sold on the courthouse steps for a pittance of what it's worth. And that didn't happen here. And Jonathan's right. A little bit of it was serendipity. We restored these buildings with historic tax credits, like back in 02, 3, 4, 5, 6. We weren't looking forward like, oh, the pandemic's going to come and we will have this big glut of empty office space on the market. It was that there was an opportunity, and that opportunity was seized, but it really took this project to give the vision to the private developers who did that, invested kind of immediately and joined us in that partnership. Yes, ma'am.
I would also add that to promote and propel forward these big projects, usually there will be a portion that will be public investment. And I think about the state of Missouri and the historic tax credits, what we had to get from the state related to support for the Power and Light District.
Odessa.
And the list goes on, and it requires an enormous commitment from people to go to Jefferson City. I look at Gary Sage, who spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in Jefferson City, sitting down one-on-one with state senators, state house members. And if we had not gone through that laborious process, we would not be able to have what we have in Kansas City. So I know some of us are not excited about politics right now, but the way of the world is it's where a lot of our support needs to come from. And that does take building relationships and spending a lot of time working on helping people from other parts of the state understand not only the benefit to Kansas City, but the benefit to the state of Missouri.
Success breeds success and momentum. You never know when you get it, how long you have it, or when you lose it, but we have it now. And one of the fun things, building on your comment, in the last 2 years, thank you, Gary, for your work early on, but building this, what we call the Kansas City delegation, and that's all of our House and Senate representatives, even if they're from Lee Summit, which Mr. Patterson gave us great support this year, but that they see their face tied to Kansas City, Missouri, and building on your great success. In the last 2 years, we received over $50 million from the state of Missouri for that South Loop project, for that park. Now think about that, talking to rural Republicans to invest in an urban park. It's because of the success that you proved we could have here, that these investments would be great return for the state of Missouri. And it's much, and Gary, and all the relationships built, it's much easier now to have those conversations. I was at the MDFB office the other day. We have some tax credits, and afterwards, 3 of the commissioners came and said, "It's so nice working with you people because you're so organized. You know what you want. You all kind of say the same thing." And we don't get that from our other partners, throughout the state. They're kind of all over the map, and that's a real testimony for laying the foundation for that. Jason, you have led for the last 2 years. Again, we the community worked on a strategic plan for downtown to build on very successful downtown corridor development strategy. It's really kind of focused on the core. You had to save the core, right? But 20 years later, it wasn't the core. It was all about corridors and connections and connecting these 22 unique neighborhoods that make up downtown. And it was very much a different process. Unlike a top-down, it was very much a grassroots up kind of exercise. And thank you so much for chairing that for the last 2 years. And many of the projects that we're working on today, transformative strategies, housing, which is number 1 on the list. We've had great success being organized. Can you talk a little bit about where you see the vision going with that and the priorities thereof?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when we started, my goal was, number 1, how do we connect communities? You think about the ring of downtown, and on the western side, you have the community on the west, and you certainly have the community then on the east, and ultimately, whether it's the western end of downtown or the eastern end or the central, there's a lot of commonalities amongst all. And for me, the goal was always, how do you cultivate project champions and not project challengers? And you do it by getting community ownership and community buy-in. There was a number of catalytic projects that were identified early on, with varying degrees of support. But ultimately, when residents, business owners, and other stakeholders realize the importance of moving downtown forward, continue to move downtown forward, like the mayor said, you got to continue on and not be complacent with the progress and the success that we've had to date. And then ultimately, you tie that into whether it was different neighborhoods associations or different business groups, for them to all realize that they all play a key part in the success of the heartbeat of the city, which is downtown. And so as we think about what it looks like maybe for the next 10 or 20 years, hopefully many of those catalytic projects will come to fruition, many of which we're working on today. But again, with that, it's just seeing and understanding the importance of them. It's making sure people are at the table that have ownership in the process, and making sure community in the end sees that with the success, not only do they win, but we as a city wins. And I think, Bill, that was the key to it all. I know for me, when we started, it was all about making sure that our communication throughout the community had it was diverse, quite frankly, and not just in the typical sense of downtown business persons, but all persons that really would be impacted. And I think we were very intentional in our efforts, and I think the result of the work that we accomplished represents many of those conversations, which quite frankly, some were very difficult because for many, they felt like they weren't a part of downtown. And so to communicate, no, we are all a part of downtown within this ring. And I think in the end, we were, again, able to cultivate project champions, which will serve downtown well for many years to come.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. And it's been an amazing experience to go through. We kind of penned the deal, hired an amazing national consultant who came in and worked with us. MIG just did fabulous work for us. But we did community engagement during COVID. Absolutely. COVID hit when we were doing community engagement, and we learned how to pivot, use Zoom to our advantage, the things I've learned on how you can do community meetings. But what it did, which I didn't realize until we had to go through it, was if you go to community meetings on any kind of issue, there'll be the 4 or 5 advocates who want it to happen and the 4 or 5 who don't want it to happen, and everyone else just kind of sits quietly in the room. Zoom gave everybody a voice because you could comment, right? You didn't have to put your hand up and stand up in front of the room and get a microphone. You could actually say, I think this is a really good idea, or I think this is not a good idea, and we collected all that data. So this strategic planning process went through thousands and thousands of citizens, not just downtown citizens, but from the whole region, because we reached out that way, and it really enabled us to do it. And thank goodness, towards the end, we were able to have some face-to-face meetings, because you really can't, you can't do this on just Zoom. It's really, you get people in a room together, and they get creative, and things happen, and there's just an energy in people. And Jonathan, last question before I think we'll go to Q&A real quick. Did this project meet your expectations? Were there things you do different, today, looking back at it? Is that listed? Show your
it exceeded my expectations in so many ways. It certainly, its impact upon the neighborhood. I think, the library was doing this and the plaza at the same time, and they were complementary as it turned out. I think that we have not done enough in terms of engaging the neighborhood, doing programming that creates a if you are a downtowner and you're not a member of the downtowner group that comes monthly and has a lunch here, it's actually a very exciting thing, exactly what the library should be doing. I also think there should be a sense of, this is the place where you find out things about the neighborhood. So I hope that's something I saw Abby in the back there, that the director and the manager of this branch think, what can we do to find the neighbors that this is the place they want to convene and meet. So that's the one thing. We did not see the huge increase in attendance except when we do the programming.
Mm-hmm. So critical.
Which was completely stopped during COVID. So we're starting again. I don't know that we'll ever do as much as Crosby and Henry Fortunato did. I think we're doing 3 a day for a while.
They're doing me. Yeah, it's an amazing time.
Anyway, so it's amazing, and you really have to thank not just the people we mentioned, but the people of Kansas City who increased the tax levy for the library twice during I've been involved in it. It's meant the library has the resources to be creative and do things. It's wonderful. Thanks for asking.
It's an amazing legacy for our community. With that, let's kind of change to.
I have one question online.
Yes.
Maybe we'll do 2 or 3
Great.
with the audience, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Somebody watching on YouTube wants to know, what is the mechanism for counting downtown visitors? And does that include anything in the formula that allows you to differentiate somebody that comes down just to eat dinner, or maybe to go dinner and then go shopping and then do some recreational activity?
Oh man, a techno nerd like me, that's awesome. It has come so far in the ability, and I'm from the era where you put college students on corners with ped counters, right, clickers. Today we use a source called Placer AI data, and what they do is real-time cellular devices, computer tracking. So they can tell us, and they can geofence any area you want to geofence. So I can just say the library district, what's happening here today, or I can say the CBD, or I can say River Market, and we do. We look at all of them constantly. And what it does is it tracks where the mobile device is. It tracks when you go into a store or a restaurant, and what you, I know it's kind of scary. When you sign that agreement for your cell phone, you kind of give the rights to that big data mining out. And, but it's incredibly accurate. So we can say, for instance, in greater downtown today, 186,000 people visit downtown daily. And that's purely by mobile device tracking. So it's not subjective, it's not estimations, it's hard count. And you can tell by the hours of where they're located, if this person, if that modular device, that mobile device is active from say 9 to 5, the algorithm says that's an employee. If it's there from say 10 till 4 in the morning, that's going to be a resident. If it's doing evening dinners and shows, it's going to be a visitor. So it does make some, it does have algorithms that assign based on the time of day assumptions on, is this, obviously there's crossover. It could be a resident going out to dinner, but basically, it's extremely accurate for what we track, which is activity. How many people are visiting the Performing Arts Center, how many people are visiting the library, how many people are visiting. I can tell you T-Mobile Center is still the 5th most active arena in the nation without a sports team. I know, isn't that incredible? And it's because you smartly, Mayor Barnes, had AEG, remember those days, Tim Lightwicki and all that, as our partner in the back then Sprint Center, now T-Mobile Center. And what AEG brought, which was brilliant, was before that relationship, if you wanted to, if you're a band and you played in LA, you wanted to go to New York or Chicago, but you skipped Kansas City. But AEG controls all those assets. And it says, oh, no, if you want to play in New York, you're playing Kansas City. And it's an amazing economic model. But again, I can tell you that as a fact in the sense that it's not subjective, it's ticket sales is what we're talking about. So you can count the tickets sold for that arena. And it ranks as one of the highest in the nation. It's like when the library, in the heydays of the programming pre-COVID, monthly it was rated as one of the top libraries in the nation for cultural programming, just based on sheer numbers of people who came and attended those wonderful, and I know we will get back to that. That's kind of one of the, like you said, one of the devastating impacts of COVID was we lost that, that community. But anyway, that's a long-winded answer to say great data sources like Placer AI, which let us really track what's happening to pretty finite detail. Another question, Jeff?
No, on audience questions, we have time for 2 or 3.
And we have a microphone right here, so if you have a question, jump up to the mic so we can get you for the folks at home.
I always want to start with something funny. I want to compliment the mayor. She's the only urban leader, prominent urban leader to pronounce the state Missouri, so good deal. So that's a segue to what I'm talking about. Now, the gentleman mentioned Patterson, Speaker of the House. He's from Lee Summit, quasi-urban. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of very prominent, powerful state officials, to put it bluntly, are stone cold country. And they think they have the idea that cities are decadent and whatever, and they're even attacking libraries, saying we're giving kids stuff they shouldn't. My question is, what can the urban core that you're talking about, can you get out and communicate with these, again, use a term, Missouri, Tobacco and Stone Cold Country folks who are quite powerful and prominent? What can you all do to meet with them and say, hey, we're not quite what you think we are or whatever? And I'd appreciate talking about that. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to have an answer to?
One of the things that we did when I was mayor was host gatherings at my home for state legislators who were from the rural parts of the state. And in that social environment, there was the opportunity for just 2 or 3 people sitting down and getting acquainted with one another and learning that although there might appear to be superficial differences, the bottom line is, for example, I was able to talk about growing up in St. Joe and having relatives in the rural part of Northwest Missouri and kind of my personal story with my small town background and my family's background, and that it made such a difference. And it sounds so simple, and I'm just using myself as one example. All of us, if we would share a little bit of our personal story, there could be those kinds of connections. And 3, 4, 5 years later, there were state legislators who would come up to either Gary or myself or whomever else was part of our team and say, I remember when we sat in your living room and talked about St. Joe and Maryville, and it was a connection. It was a human connection, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Gary Sage, who was with the EDC, and I think something we did systemically and that would build on those personal relationships was under the EDC's leadership many years ago, we really created, it was called the Consensus Agenda, and you would get kind of all the civic organizations from, South Chamber of Commerce, Northern Chamber of Commerce, anyone who, Coalition of the Willing, and we come up with those 10 or 12 issues that helped us all. Like the new Buck O'Neill Bridge, that helps folks come to work, it helped increase in capacity. That wasn't on the state's radar screen at all. They were just gonna do a cheap little rehab on the old bridge and call it a day. But by having this consensus agenda that said, no, that's not good enough, we need more capacity, and all of us kind of spoke with the same voice. Gary and his team then would organize, and we go down to the state and just knock on every door and talk to every legislator. And you're absolutely right, you build relationships where people see you just as people, who want to do good for their community. It really changed everything. And I think this, what we call the Kansas City delegation, is a real thing. Because you're right, I can call Mr. Patterson, he'll take my call. That wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago.
He's quasi-urban though.
He's at least some, he's quasi. Kind of like,
you got to deal with they go out a little further than that.
Yeah. And again, I think it's an amazing, and I think that process systemically, just keep talking to people, good ideas, repeat it enough times. You plant seeds, and that we went and talked to the state, the governor's office, Lieutenant Governor Keogh, now Governor-elect Keogh, Mr. Patterson, Lincoln Huff. They all saw the vision on the South Loop Park and really helped us, talk to our friends in the rural areas about why this was an important thing. And, at the end of the day, it passed unanimously in the House and Senate. I'll stop there, but yeah, it's having that kind of continuously interacting with them. I think it's helped us a lot, but that needle is always in flux. Yes,
we'll finish up with these 2 questions at the microphone.
I have 2 thoughts to offer. First, right across the street from us is the old transit center. It's very underutilized right now. The ATA still owns it. We've all seen renderings of a high-rise structure on that site. That must not happen. It must remain an open space as a civic asset. I suggest it be considered the library's front yard. Call it the Central Library Plaza. Second, every great city needs a great ceremonial street. Grand Boulevard fits my definition of a great street. It has a 100-foot right-of-way, more than any other street downtown. And frankly, if you walk it, it's really sad. It needs a whole lot of attention. It needs a concerted effort, a Grand Boulevard project to make Grand Boulevard live up to its potential.
Yes to both counts. We're actually in conversations with KCATA, because you're right, the surplus real estate there. And I think everyone on this panel wants that to stay as an open public space. And we just came back from a wonderful conference out in Seattle where there's a park I used to manage called Westlake Park, and it was a beautiful park, but it was just always empty of people. And they've done some amazing temporary kind of installations that promote that kind of activity, like shuffleboard tables and ping pong and food truck service and those kinds of things. So right now there's a plan being worked on just to kind of, at least in the short term, activate that space so it becomes more of an asset to the community and not just an empty spaces. I don't think KCATA knows what they want to do with that parcel. They're kind of holding it, but and we've been talking to, because there's some good things happening on Grand. You're right, it's such a monumental street. There's just so much of it. But years ago we were able to drop the Shoppers Parkade and kind of make that a pre-development site. A new Marriott Hotel just went in on Grand Street. The Ambassador Hotel went on Grand Street. So you see these pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. And we've been working with the new city manager, Brian Platt, and Mayor Lucas. I'm working more with the business community side, seeing if we can't raise the funds to do a development plan for Grand Street. It doesn't need a master plan, it's got those. It doesn't need a streetscape plan. It needs a development plan. How do we get these properties that are just being held, or the surface lots, you know, what can we put in place for all the development tools we have to see the same kind of transit development we saw on Main Street when the streetcar went down? But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Grand should be our Michigan Avenue, and it isn't today. It really is kind of in that future vision. I'm sorry, Jason. Question, sir? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Mayor Barnes and I got here in 1980, and we had 3 mayors that built a wonderful foundation for our city. Mayor Berkeley, Reverend Cleaver, and you went to county executive, and you didn't forget us. Cleaver went to Washington and didn't forget us. And Mr. Berkeley, you know, tension envelope on 18th. That whole street, you know, back then, it was worse than a dump. So I just want to say thank you for setting the foundation for what we're building on now.
So I think that's all the time we have. I want to thank you all for staying with us and the great questions. And I want to thank our panel. I mean, it's just an amazing amount of knowledge and commitment and civic to our community. So thank you all.